I need it on the record officially 1:26 Central Time as we are recording this, and Luke Getsy still has a job. So I'm at a loss right now. Just I want everyone to know starting this. I'm at a loss, and I'm a frustrated man. I'm a man who has been very battered and bruised and beaten in his life as a fan of the great game of national football, and Luke Getsy still has a job. So I don't know how much I'm going to be useful on the recording today, because
fair enough.
Until Luke Getsy doesn't have a job anymore, I don't know what I'm capable of else that I'm saying except for like hashtag fire Getsy. I think that's the majority of my vocabulary right now. So we need to establish that before we go any further into playoff preview and celebrating teams that deserve to be celebrated, right? And players who deserve to be celebrated, because all I see is I'm like Rain Man at the blackjack table, and all I see is hashtag fire Getsy, screen pass on 3rd and 22, hashtag fire Getsy, Justin Fields 0 passing attempts in the third quarter, hashtag fire Getsy. It's really it's tough. So I'm going to try to.
You're like the Zach Galifianakis gif, trying to figure out what the Bears are doing and what
exactly. But all I see is us as fans chanting for hashtag fire Getsy, and the Bears 128 now, officially 128 on Monday, January 8th, and he still has a job. So,
well, look, that's what we're here, as co-hosts and as friends. We pick each other up when the other is down. So I'll be perfectly fine to shoulder the load for this show, so you can kind of get your thoughts together and try and figure this whole thing out.
Until you end, and yes. I will let you have your flowers. You've earned a trip to Buffalo, and so I'm very happy for you. And I will try to get my stuff together here and actually form sentences that make sense, that don't include the terms fire and Getsy.
Well, there's a lot of confusion for sure in Chicagoland, but there's a lot of confusion throughout the league in many respects. We did have a few teams get some finality with the positions of their head coaches. We'll get to that obviously in this episode, but of course you all are here because the 2024 NFL playoff field is set. It is in stone and ready to go. 14 teams on the road to Super Bowl 58, and we are very much looking forward to the road ahead as we get ready for the wild card round this upcoming weekend. But of course, we start things off with a recap of Week 18, which put this field of into stone and got these things ready to go. There were a couple of surprises, of course. Some teams didn't make it that we thought should have or would have, but of course, that is the haves and have-nots that make up the 2023 NFL season, and the road to the 2024 Super Bowl begins right now.
That's a great graphic.
That's a great graphic. All of these teams were jockeying for position, if you will, pun intended, throughout the season to get to this position to go to the playoffs and make a run at the Super Bowl. And we have the list there. So we'll go over the final slate in just a few moments, but some news to get to as we get this thing rolling. By the way, but I just want to add on to what you started off the show with. How crazy would it be after all that the Bears have been through, after the wild nature of playing around with the number one pick, finally getting it, all of this stuff. What if they just had Luke Getsy, Matt Eberflus, Justin Fields all back next year? And it'd be like, what is going on after all of this? Here we are running it back. But at least they would have something to do with the number one pick. So, I mean, there is that. They would have added stuff. If they did that, then I would hope it was either Marvin Harrison or a massive haul. Because Marvin Harrison would be really great trying to block defensive ends in Luke Getsy schemes that he's so brilliant at coming up with. Go.
We'd love to use the number one overall pick on a wide receiver who then could block for bubble screens for Luke Getsy. It'd be pretty sick.
We woke up to news. The Atlanta Falcons did not do enough to get to the dance. They are not in the NFL playoffs, and so we woke up to news that head coach Arthur Smith was fired. They were winning early on, but that was very early on in the first quarter. Once they got to the second half, it was all New Orleans from there.
Yeah, Derek Carr
Saints
looked
won
good.
48-17. Yeah, so the Atlanta Falcons fall to 7-10. That's the same record they've had 3 straight seasons, I believe. And so just not enough that Arthur Blank saw to keep this thing going. And so he fires Arthur Smith. And so that search will continue. The Washington Commanders have fired head coach Ron Rivera and their GM. So that search is fully underway as well. Of course, there are questions surrounding what's going to happen with Bill Belichick in New England. Some sources, primarily coming from Jay Glazer during the games this weekend, that he will not be with the New England Patriots this upcoming season, but nothing official has happened yet. The Panthers fired their GM, Scott Fitterer, and is that everything, Mark? Did I get
Ron
all
Rivera,
the
he's
current,
gone. The
moves?
Commanders GM is gone. Yeah, Fitterer now completes the whole GM and coach gone in Carolina. I think the key with the Belichick one is I don't expect anything to happen today with Bill. I fully expect him to get like kind of his own day, if that makes sense. And then the other thing was Arthur Smith. I now think Atlanta is really, truly one of the really good openings in the NFL. It might be behind the Chargers, the second best opening in the NFL right now, because the weapons that team has in that division with a really young, improving defense as well, that's a really solid opening. And if you then can have kind of carte blanche for whatever you want to do at the quarterback position, either trade up and get aggressive, trade for a veteran, sign a veteran in free agency. There's a lot to like in that Atlanta opening. And Arthur Blank is not a bad owner, in my opinion. It feels like to work under. He's a visible owner. He's an owner you recognize, you see him, but he's not. I don't get the sense that he's a meddling owner or anything like that. So all of a sudden, that Atlanta job becomes, I think, pretty darn interesting. And that to me is going to be one of those hot spots. If I'm a Ben Johnson or I'm one of those young offense coordinators, if I'm an Eric Bieniemy and I have a chance to say, wait a minute, I can go down to that division with those weapons and kind of put the pressure on, go get the quarterback I want to get. You know what I mean? What would you have to get to move up to number one to get a Caleb Williams or what it might be? That job could all of a sudden become a really great job here in the years to come.
Yeah, the only thing I'd argue is I think the Commander's job would be really interesting, for one, because you have new ownership and you kind of have a very clean slate to work with, and a relatively blue blood franchise in the NFL, and some definitely good weapons. Of course, they've cleaned out a little bit, especially on the defensive end, but some good weapons to work with.
Scary Terry,
and the number 2 overall pick this year. So you have a lot. Like if you're a head coach, you're like, wow, what are we doing with that number 2 pick? That could really sway me. I mean, you don't even need to get the number 1 pick to still make that super valuable in terms of, whether it's Drake May or if you feel good about, a different quarterback. So yeah, I think Washington it would be equally as tempting, but the Falcons, of course, play in a much easier division. That one is exciting and enticing. But of course, they are all out of the dance, so that's why we are talking about them being fired and looking for new coaches and all of that. And there will be plenty of discussion to be had on these teams this offseason. But our attention now turns completely towards the 2024 playoffs. And so I'll share my screen here to look at what we've got going here with that group. So right now, not much has changed in terms of the top portions there. We already talked about the Ravens and the 49ers clinching themselves the 1 seed and a bye. So they are off this upcoming weekend. Nothing new there, but we've got the Bills as the 2 seed, as the Cowboys as the 2 seed as well. Bills clinching the 2 seed because of Sunday Night Football and the victory over the Miami Dolphins. A close one, even though it felt like for much of the game, the Bills were, in a little bit better position overall throughout, kind of dominated in some areas, but really at the end of the day, turnovers kept this one a close game, 21-14 the final there. What were your thoughts on the Bills winning this one after all that we've talked about this year? I certainly had predicted them to not even make the playoffs. They don't just make it, they win the division and snatch it from the Miami Dolphins here to get the 2 seed to host a playoff game this upcoming weekend.
Well, listen, I mean, it was first off, what I liked about just the win in general was Josh Allen wasn't Superman, right? Like we've seen Josh Allen carry this team to victories this season. This was one of those games where Josh Allen was struggling. I mean, in the first half, they were moving the ball a ton, but they couldn't score. And in the second half, he made, the big throw to Gabe Davis for the touchdown. They get the punt return or a kickoff for one of the special teams return for a touchdown. And then
it was a punt.
Punt return. I knew I couldn't think of exactly which one it was.
Deontay Hardy made a $250,000 on that punt return. By the way, it boosted his
incentive
return average from 9.1 to over 10, and it had to be over 10 on the year. Yeah,
that's sick. And so, but in general, my thought on that game honestly was, what a Bills way to win this game, and then with the pick late over Tua, and for the Bills, it's so, I don't even know how you could put value. I mean, it's such an incredible victory because you now guarantee you avoid the Ravens until the championship game. And right now, there's only one team that we think is head and shoulders above every other team in the NFL, and that's the Ravens, right? So if you can avoid them as long as possible, aka be an NFC team and you avoid them to the Super Bowl, or be the Bills where you avoid them until the championship game, that's huge. I mean, that is absolutely massive. So it's a giant win, and it's a big momentum win for them. I mean, you think about where they were at 6-6, and now to have this division locked up to be the 2 seed, to know that they are an upset victory away from hosting an AFC championship game. It's fantastic. And I think the Bills, for the first time in a long time, feel like they're playing with house money. You know what I mean? This feels kind of like shit. This we're playing really good football right now. We're playing loose, and you know what I mean? We're finding ways to win games, even though it's not the traditional Bills that we're used to seeing over the last 2 or 3 years. So you got to feel great about it if you're a Bills fan. If you're a Dolphins fan, I mean, what a disaster. The only reason Dolphins fans should feel good today is they had the second worst collapse of any NFL team in the state of Florida over the last 5 weeks, in the sense that they feel like they were 3 weeks ago, they were the lock for the 1 seed, and here they are now on the road at Kansas City. It's not the worst matchup for Miami because Kansas City can't score to save their lives, but it's going to be like freezing cold at Kansas City this weekend. And so it's a disaster. It's a disaster for Miami.
Yeah, that was a really rough one for the Dolphins for sure, because they needed to somehow put something together and reclaim the division, for one, because they haven't been able to do that in quite some time.
I don't think, but I thought I saw somewhere today the Dolphins haven't won a playoff game since 2000.
Has it really been? Wow, it's been almost a quarter
and it's
century.
Like, when you think about that, I mean, wow. They remind you of a team that the Dolphins don't feel like a Commanders or a Jets or a Lions, but they're way more like those teams than they are, the Steelers, the Ravens, the consistent winners, Kansas City over the last 25 years. And so, listen, there's a lot of pressure now going into Kansas City. They should have Waddle healthy, so that they're going to have look. They're kind of full stable of weapons, but that game's going to be, to me, that's going to be the game to watch on the AFC side of the bracket next week.
I'm very intrigued by that matchup. They do likely get Waddle back. They likely get Mostert back, and Xavier Howard on the defensive side as well. So they'll get some help. Obviously, their biggest issues the last month have been the health of, their defensive ends and outside linebackers. They have no pass rushers now.
Yeah.
We had Melvin Ingram in there turning back the clock a little bit, but they are going to have to, put some guys and combinations together to try and create some sort of pass rush, especially against Patrick Mahomes. But I thought overall they did an okay job against Buffalo. And that's why this game, while you got to give kudos to Buffalo for, putting themselves, in a hole and digging out of it throughout the year and getting to the point where they're the 2 seed hosting a game, all of that, kudos to them. And the Miami Dolphins overall are a good team. So I'm not going to take anything away from the Bills winning in any way. But all of that being said, I thought Miami really screwed themselves in this game by turning away from the running game very early. I mean, Devon Achane is dynamic, and they were finding success, albeit in spurts, but that's kind of how the Dolphins are set up. 5 are going to go for no gain, but the 6th is going to go for 25 yards. That's just kind of how that is set up. So to me, they needed to stick with that because it was going to be the physical game and winning the time of possession that was going to get them the victory in this one, especially early on when you could tell that it wasn't going to be a huge scoring fest. So that was a problem. Capitalizing on turnovers, they had 3 turnovers to their 1 in early on in this game. And so I just thought it was, not the ability to capitalize on opportunity. I didn't think Buffalo played particularly well in this game, which you could think of both sides of the spectrum. Hey, it's impressive that they won despite turning the ball over as much as they did and not, having the splash that you're accustomed to, not having Gabe Davis, all of that. But I didn't think either team was particularly impressive. It's just that Buffalo was able to, have 1 or 2 more plays than Miami. And so at the end of the day, I think what Miami's going to have to do and what I expect the Chiefs to do is run the football. This is not going to be a shootout, maybe like it would have been expected to be. If you said week 2 of this past season, Miami and Kansas City are going to be in the playoffs, you'd say, oh, that's going to be 55-45.
Yeah.
Not so much. This might be the same thing, a 21-14 game where Pacheco runs for 150 yards and Mostert and Achane combined for 3 touchdowns. That's probably going to be the type of game that we're looking for, and it's going to be which team wins the time of possession and, doesn't turn the ball over. So I agree that that's probably going to be the most interesting matchup of the slate. So turning over to the 2 seed on the other side, the Dallas Cowboys, another team that has grabbed the bull by the horns and, found a way to string together victories when it seemed like another team in their division had the division on lockdown, the Philadelphia Eagles. They were on a collapse. So, the Eagles are the Dolphins in this situation and the Cowboys are the Bills. Cowboys win handily 38-10. They are absolutely playing their best ball in December and going into January here. And so how are we feeling about them as the 2 seed? They get to host. We know they play really well at home. They're going to be hosting who is it? They're going to be hosting the
Green Bay Packers
this upcoming week. Mike McCarthy in his return, to take on Green Bay. An interesting setup for this game, but overall, as much as we still want to see it from Dallas in the playoffs, I gotta say, man, like I'm just impressed with what they've done this year, especially the second half, and to lock up the 2 seed and get themselves the NFC East after everything that looked like things were not going in their favor.
Yeah, I mean, I have to eat a crow a little bit. I was very vocal about thinking the Cowboys were going to go 1-3 down the stretch. They ended up going 3-1 down the stretch. Really should have been 2-2. We know what happened with that Detroit game. I don't need to rehash that. So they deserve some credit for grabbing, you said, the division by the horns when the Eagles just completely fell apart. I mean, again, the Eagles should also be thanking the Jaguars a little bit for their epic collapse, taking some heat off of the Eagles. Both the Eagles and the Dolphins are, I feel, very lucky to be in the playoffs this morning. They don't really feel like playoff teams, to be honest with you. When you look around, it's just how they've been playing over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So for Dallas, listen, they came out against Washington and they absolutely took care of business. I like that they started their starters. It got a little late in that game, and I was like, okay, we can get these guys out now, Mike. You can. CeeDee Lamb doesn't need to be catching passes here late in the third, but they locked up the victory when the Eagles completely shit the bed. And, now the Eagles got to worry about the health of A.J. Brown and the finger of Jalen Hurts. We're getting all that here in just a little bit. But the Cowboys are rolling going into the playoffs, and it's got to feel good. And they are a completely different team at home versus on the road. I think the game against Green Bay is going to be an interesting one. On the flip side, if you want to talk about Green Bay here now, for the Packers, listen, they had what was it, 4 weeks ago? They lost that game after winning 3 in a row. They dropped the game to the Giants, and it was like, oh, man, here we go. The Packers just killed themselves. They could have ended up cruising into the playoffs, 10-win team, putting the pressure on the Lions. And we kind of thought now the Packers shot themselves in the foot. They might miss a chance to make the playoffs. But again, then they stayed hot.
Yeah, they lost to the Giants and Buccaneers in back-to-back weeks.
Yes, and then they found a way to get hot down the stretch, and a lot of it was the play of Jordan Love because that defense has not been good. Now, the defense showed up against the Chicago Bears, but, I don't want to overreact to how good Green Bay is based off a win against the Bears at home because it's just one of those things, being in the AFC North, there are certain divisional matchups. You can't compare what Green Bay did to Chicago and think, oh, it's going to translate well to what they do against the Dallas. They have a mental ownership over the Chicago Bears. Like they just certain
it's
teams,
big brother, little brother. It's
certain teams, it's just not even. It doesn't. X's and O's don't matter. Like it just doesn't matter. It is a mental. It's a whole 100% mental game. I don't know how it works. That's just sports. That's one of the things that we love and we hate about sports. And so I give Green Bay a lot of credit. They played a good game against the Bears, and they found a way to not screw that game up against the Bears team that came in with a lot of momentum, feeling high and feeling good. So the Packers versus the Cowboys. Obviously, that matchup is a viewership gold mine, ratings gold mine. And the great storylines of McCarthy and the Packers. So the interest of Jordan Love and his first full season. I'll ask you this question. One of the things, actually, it was my wife who's asking me about this day. My brother-in-law is a diehard Packers fan. She's kind of like, what do we think about Jordan Love? Like, is he really this good? And I told her, I was like, I'm at the point now where I feel very comfortable saying I have now high expectations for Jordan Love going forward. If this is year one, like, all right, the bar is pretty high. The bar is wild card, 30 plus touchdowns, 4,000 yards. Like that's the bar. The problem is we've seen it now recently when you talk about quarterbacks after a really good year, Trevor Lawrence, like how quickly things can just plummet. I mean, look at around the league, the quarterbacks who had disastrous seasons after coming in now with expectations. So Jordan Love, well, yes, this season was absolutely a success for him. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden now I want to crown him as a top 10 quarterback and sure, he's going to be great for, people already saying, oh, they found their next great one. Pump the brakes. I mean, look at the season that Justin Herbert had. Look at the season that Deshaun Watson had. Look at the season that was wasted for Aaron Rodgers and the injury to Kirk Cousins. I mean, things.
Jalen Hurts even.
Jalen Hurts, huge regression type of season. Even Patrick Mahomes at a down year. So for some reason, there was like a quarterback bug that went around this year. So we'll wait and see. But I definitely now, if this is the expectation, 30 touchdowns, 4,000 yards, that's a pretty darn high bar he set for himself. And I will say this, I thought, especially down the stretch, October on, he played like a top 10 quarterback in the league in the last, 6 weeks of the season here.
Yeah, I mean, not by play style at all, but he kind of reminds me of Brock Purdy in some ways. Like we didn't know much about the guy, comes in with relatively low expectations given, Brock Purdy, obviously with the system and everything. But I think Jordan Love has certainly benefited from having a Matt LaFleur to bring him along. And so, I think those are aspects of it. He's obviously way more athletic and has a bigger arm than Brock Purdy does. But I am interested to see how this translates into next year, his second full season as a starter. He does have a few years under his belt of sitting in the wings and waiting. He sees the opportunity this year. Got to give him kudos for that. I agree. I'm not ready to crown him, but I'm certainly ready to feel like, oh, okay, well, they've got a guy that they can feel comfortable about. They're in a situation, let's say, where they're not going to be looking for a quarterback next year. Same with the 49ers. We're running back with Brock Purdy, regardless of what happens here. So you feel comfortable with what you have, but you got to temper expectations.
It's a great way to say
crown the guy.
Great way to say, if I was a Packers fan, I wouldn't be quick to say, here's the 5-year, $200 million deal. I want to see if you can do this again next year, make a wild card, be really competitive, 30 and 4,000. Well, then, yeah, you lock them up and you say, let's roll and let's grow this thing and build around this puppy for sure.
And I mean, I don't want to say obviously Aaron Rodgers is an all-time great, but I mean, Jordan Love, for the most part, I understand that they've had, some rookie receivers really, come into the fold here. But he had a lot of the similar weapons, and Jordan Love was able to have, efficiency and success with these weapons and really make the receiving core
like
actually look like a formidable group.
Yeah,
right?
They felt like a completely different team this year at times. And in Green Bay, the energy feels young, exciting, arrow pointing up. And with Aaron last year, in the last 2 years, it felt very much like, oh, this is just kind of gross and weird. And you see now, especially with what Aaron's doing on his McAfee interviews, everything he touches just feels controversial right now. And the Packers, nothing about the Packers feels controversial. They feel they are the youngest team to ever make the playoffs. That's got to feel great if you're a Packers fan. I almost threw up in my mouth.
Yeah, I know. It's a Bears fan's worst nightmare. Unfortunately, the situation that the Packers seem to find themselves in. But yeah, the wide receiver core actually looks like a pretty decent group. It might be a strength of the team with Wicks and Reed and Dobbs and Watson. I mean, they're starting to look like they've got a good grouping there. All right, so looking at some other groupings here at the 3 seeds and the 4 seeds. So the Chiefs and the Lions are your 3 seed in the AFC and NFC respectively. Kansas City is obviously going to be playing host. They will take on the Cleveland Brown or the Miami Dolphins. Excuse me. Wait, did I screw this up? Yeah. The Miami Dolphins, and your Detroit Lions going to be taking on the Los Angeles Rams. Welcoming back Matthew Stafford in the building. That's going to be interesting and weird. I saw Big Cat and PFT, just like those guys talking about how weird it's going to feel and kind of icky and gross to see Matt Stafford come back. And the Lions fans obviously want to welcome him in, and they love what he did for the team. But, here they are in the 3 seed, which he never got them to. And they traded for, Jared Goff for him, and Jared Goff's here leading the team. So, yeah, it's an interesting situation. But, yeah, your thoughts on how these both teams got here. Obviously, the Lions getting a win over the Vikings to improve to 12-5 and get themselves in this position, whereas the Chiefs barely beat the Chargers, but they rested pretty much everybody 13-12 to also put themselves in the 3 seed. So, look, I mean, Chiefs kind of got lucky. I thought the seeding mattered. I personally would have played some guys to ensure that happened. But it is what it is. They both end up in the 3 seed, and so their decisions ended up working out. And here they are hosting a playoff game. So yeah, your thoughts first on the Chiefs, then we'll get to the Lions after that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we talked a lot about the Dolphins kind of Chiefs already, and I'll say this, just focusing on the Chiefs. I think it was really smart of them to just rest everyone. Obviously, win or lose, they weren't changing. They were locked into the 3 seed. I think
they were. Yeah, you're right. Okay, never mind. I take back what I said then. Yeah, that's.
Oh yeah, no.
I thought for some reason that the Chiefs still could have, gotten the 2 seed.
No, they couldn't have gotten the 2 because Miami would have had the wins over them, and Buffalo has the tiebreaker.
No, they couldn't have gotten the 4 seed. So yeah, they were good then.
No, I think my biggest thing with the Chiefs is that, again, what are we getting with this playoff run? You know what I mean? Are we getting a Chiefs team that will realize that they need to lean in to Pacheco and the run game and try to grind out with this really good defense? Because if we get a Chiefs team that believes in that feels like, all right, let's just make this our identity, use our good offensive line, lean on our great defense, and run the ball with this hard-nosed 7th rounder, Isaiah Pacheco, then this is a Chiefs team that absolutely could find themselves playing in an AFC championship game. But if this is a Chiefs team that feels like they're just going to, no, this is what we do. We spread it out 4 wide and, empty sets and we're going to try to Patrick Mahomes, throw the ball 30 times you to death. I think it's a team that could absolutely find themselves, out in the first round. I mean, Miami can beat Kansas City. They can. I believe that. I'm going to pick the Chiefs early on. I feel that way. Like, this is my gut, how I feel on Monday. But the Chiefs should be should be excited about this opportunity. I think if you're Andy Reid, if I would sell this to my team is, listen, this is the year everyone's doubting us, right? Like, this is the year we can really prove everyone wrong. We can kind of shock the world, defend the Super Bowl title. We're still the defending champs. They really can play the chip on the shoulder, no one believes in us card this year. So let's see if they can get that working for them. They're going to be healthy as they can be going into this run. And so that's also a huge positive for them. And then as far as the Lions go, listen, the Lions got screwed. The Lions should be the number 2 seed. They beat Dallas. I mean, they beat Dallas. They got screwed. And what they get for it, they get now maybe one of the top 5 greatest players in their franchise coming to their place with the chance to upset them in their first home playoff game in 30 years. It is a Shakespearean tragedy. I mean, I feel like we could be watching Othello on this weekend with that. I mean, I my heart is breaking already for Lions fans with the thought of them losing. The Rams versus the Lions is the matchup for me to watch. If I could watch one football game this weekend, it'd be this game. The storylines, the gameplay, the quarterbacks in Detroit. I can't wait for it. I absolutely can't wait for it. The coaching, I'm really excited for the Lions. I think the Lions will win. It sucks that Sam Laporta got hurt, but again, I love that the Lions played their starters knowing they still could end up having one that got the 2 seed. And it worked out. The Philly lost. They were a Dallas loss away from locking it up. So I love that they went for it, even though it may mean that Laporta doesn't play this weekend. As far as the Rams go, their matchup, listen, the Rams, what a win for them in Week 18. Carson Wentz showing on up. This Rams team, they are the epitome. I mean, I feel like I've already said it with a couple teams, but if I could only choose one team to use this phrase for, like, they earn it. They literally are house money. No one believed the Rams could be at this spot, could be, playing this good a football. Puka Nacua is just an absolute stud. I don't know how, Sean McVay has done such a great job coaching this football team. The Rams absolutely can upset the Lions. The Rams absolutely could find themselves in an NFC Championship game. I believe that. This is going to be a great game. I think if you want points and you want fun, this is going to be the game this weekend. Both teams have earned this right to be here. It just sucks that one of those two teams is not going to be playing in the second round. And it's all because the Lions got screwed.
They did. I would take, we'll get to our predictions later on this week, but like my early thoughts are the Lions are going to be extra motivated coming into this game. They're at home. But, this is the one probably, though, that home doesn't matter as much. I mean, they both play in domes. They're both, acclimated to this style of play. The Lions are a more physical team overall, I think. And so that's my early thoughts are they get the edge because of that. And so, I also hope that they win just from a, nostalgic standpoint. It'd be great for Detroit to be, relevant once again. And they already are, but to win a playoff game certainly does, wonders for that franchise moving forward. And so then as we look at the 4 seeds, then to round out the division winners, the Texans take the opportunity from the Colts. The Colts were in this position in the playoffs coming into the week. The Texans were on the outside looking in, hoping to get themselves into a playoff spot. The Jaguars blew it. We'll talk about that later. But the Texans get the victory. CJ Stroud, returns to the lineup and does what he needs to do to get a big win over the rival Colts. And the Buccaneers do what they need to do, get a win. It didn't look pretty. The offense was bad, but they get a shutout win over the Panthers, and they secure the division and put themselves into hosting a playoff game as well. And this was a team that I had slated for, I think, 5 wins. So, another team that really, blew my expectations out of the water. Both of these teams did, really. Texans, I think I had 6 wins. Yeah. So there you go. Texans with a big turnaround. DeMeco Ryans, CJ Stroud should be applauded. But yeah, both these teams hosting games. Your thoughts on these 4 seeds?
The 4 seeds, listen, for Tampa Bay, I mean, congrats to them. What a unique season they went through. And for Baker Mayfield, for Mike Evans, for those veterans who, especially all last year. Remember, a year ago at this time, we were talking about, gosh, man, if they didn't have Tom Brady, he's just willing them. It's all Brady. This is just Brady, pure GOAT, the greatest of all time, just willing this team. It's a terrible team, and he's just willing them. They're all old, and he's just willing it. And yet, it's the same basically exact team, only you plug and play Baker Mayfield. He's earned a contract extension with the Bucs. I would sign him to a Geno Smith type deal tomorrow. As soon as the season ends for the Bucs, and just say we're going to ride with him and this, ride out this core and see what we can get. If we see if we can kind of retool and not have to completely rebuild, kind of like what the Rams have done. Just like no, draft as many players you can, add as much youth as you can, see if you can coach down up. So I'm happy for Todd Bowles. I'm happy for his staff. I'm happy for these veterans. They have a real shot against Philly. And we'll talk about those 5 seeds here in a second. And so, listen, I'm ecstatic for them. I'm much more excited to watch the Bucs in the playoffs than I would be if it was the Saints or the Falcons. Yeah, the Saints and the Falcons were just so ugly and up and down all year. If I had to choose one NFC South team to watch play another game, I'm glad it's the Bucs. And then as far as the Texans go, listen, you watch that game against the Colts. This kid, CJ Stroud, I'm not so sure he's probably the 5th best quarterback in the NFL. And if he can go on a run, if CJ Stroud ends up in an AFC championship game, what's not to say that he's not a top 3 quarterback in the NFL? I mean, the way you just watch it with your eyes. I mean, if you watch that game, I watched every snap of that game against the Colts. And credit the Colts. What an incredible season. Shane Steichen, terrible 4th down decision to call that timeout. And then, to not give it to Jonathan Taylor. Yeah. Jonathan Taylor is a stud. I mean, it was like beast mode 2.0, like they throw it instead of running. It's just whatever.
If the goal was to throw the opponent off by not having Jonathan Taylor on there, like they'll never throw it to Tyler Goodson. That's that you don't make that decision with
it's a weird, and Goodson. I mean, listen, it worked. The play call worked. It would have got a first down if he catch it. So it's a hard thing to criticize, and Shane Steichen deserves a ton of credit. He was great this year, and this Colts team was so fun to watch. But I'll tell you what, Dan, you watch that game. I mean, the kid is everything you want. He is 100% it factor. And you know what? He's really a humble kid. Like you just watch him. He's not even like
team dude.
Like Patrick Mahomes doesn't rub me the wrong way, but Patrick Mahomes is really, really fiery. And Mahomes, I could see in a couple of years, if he wins another Super Bowl too, like people really kind of turning on him, because he's like, he could get that. He gets a little bit of Brady where you're like, dude, just shut up a little bit. You're whiny. You're a little complainy. Okay, we get it. You're on every commercial. That's not CJ Stroud. Like CJ Stroud balls and is confident, but he's really humble. I mean, right now, I would take Lamar, I'd take Mahomes, I'd take Allen, and I would take Burrow ahead of Stroud. But I think that's it. I really think that's it right now. And he has a chance, depending on if Lamar poops his pants in the playoffs like he's done in the past, he has it, and if he makes a deep run, he has a chance to pass a couple of those guys, because Burrow can't stay healthy to save his life right now. And Lamar's playoff record, we know what it is. It's just not good enough right now. And so this kid is special. And I know we just talked about, hey, one season for Jordan Love. You got to see it. We have to see it again, right? Because we were saying this about Trevor Lawrence last year. The dude is special. He beat the Chargers in the playoffs. So we got to see this over and over again. But through 1 year so far, I mean, he's everything. He's fantastic.
Well, yeah, and Jordan Love, wasn't a rookie. This is his 4th year. It was his rookie season, if you want to talk about first year as a starter, but also he didn't perform nearly as impressive as CJ Stroud this year either.
He was not.
I think CJ Stroud had a way better season.
Test,
overall.
yes. I mean, Stroud missed some games, and his numbers may not be as impressive, but test, if it's not close.
It's not close. Yeah, so no, the future's bright for sure with him and with that entire team over there. Probably going to get coach of the year is DeMeco Ryans if it's not Kevin Stefanski, who got the Cleveland Browns behind Joe Flacco into the 5 seed. So they've had that locked up, and they played a game against the Bengals with, I don't know if they had any starters playing in that game. So the Bengals did get a 31-14 win, but it didn't matter. The Browns already had this seed locked up.
Yeah.
Eagles, meanwhile, did play starters, and it didn't work out very well. A.J. Brown got hurt. It looks like he'll probably be okay. Jalen Hurts got hurt, and then they kind of just started pulling people. The Giants won 27-10. Just what a fall from grace for Philly, who was looking great. They were 10-5. At one point, or I'm sorry, 10-1, not 10-5. They were 10-1, and have since gone 1-5 to end the season. So a brutal slump for them from a team that was almost guaranteed the 1 seed at one point, falling all the way here to not being able to host a playoff game.
It's crazy.
They're going to be on the road. Just a wild sequence of events. It's going to be them pitted up against the Buccaneers, the Browns taking on the Texans. 2 interesting matchups here. What are your thoughts on the Browns as they enter with Joe Flacco into postseason play? Like, can this magic continue? And for the Eagles, yeah, they're playing the Bucs, but do they have any momentum or enough talent to override what they're stumbling into over there in Tampa, with this matchup? So I'm curious your thoughts on both of those, because they're 2 teams at 2 very different points in those 5 seeds, 2 different feelings of a 5 seed for sure.
Listen, for the Browns, I mean, again, really smart of them to just rest everyone. I know it feels weird because it feels like they may have killed their momentum a bit, but I think what would have killed this as a Browns team, remember we talked about it, it's a miracle they made it this point. Think of all of the injuries. Chubb, obviously Watson, offensive linemen, 2 starting offensive linemen down on the defense, linebackers. I mean, they've been really decimated by injuries, and here they are. They find themselves in a really great spot. I mean, if you're Cleveland, you look and you say, we get to go to Houston against a rookie with this defense, and he's missing his number 1 wide receiver, C.J. Stroud will be in that game, with their defense that can get after the quarterback. I think if you're Cleveland, you say to yourself, if we can get by Houston, we love our chances if we end up playing Baltimore. Because, again, divisional opponent on the road, they're not going to be scared of Baltimore at all. The Browns absolutely are in a really unique spot to cause chaos in the AFC playoffs. They really are. And if the Browns somehow make it to an AFC championship game, whether they're playing a Bills team or a Chiefs team on the other side of the bracket, all of those teams are going to be not happy they're playing the Cleveland Browns, because they will be playing with so much momentum and so much freedom that it'll be. I mean, all the pressure will be on the other team. It's a little bit why I fear the Cowboys this weekend. Well, I know we'll talk about that on Friday, but I'm already percolating that like in my head. Like, Cowboys have all the pressure on them this weekend. Like, they've got to perform against the youngest team to ever make the playoffs, and a Green Bay team that, again, feels like they're playing loose and with some house money. But and as far as the Eagles go, I mean, what can you say? I would I be shocked if the Eagles are able to just kind of rally in the playoffs? No, and I think the Bucs are a good team for them to be able to do it against, to kind of get some momentum, get some mojo. But man, they need it, and they need it bad. And if the Bucs go out there and just lay an absolute beatdown on the Eagles, I don't think any of us would be shocked. And at this point in time, I think that's kind of what we should expect. I mean, this Eagles team is just, they're floundering. I mean, and they are grasping at straws, and they feel so much like that heavyweight fighter who just is in the in the middle of these like late rounds, and they have a knockout punch. They have more talent than the person they're fighting, but technically they're just a mess. It's like, what did this dude go out? Like, was he out till 2 a.m. the night before? Like, why is he everything looks wrong with them. Like, everything looks wrong. And if you're the Eagles right now, listen, you've got to find a way to get up. You're in the playoffs. You're playing a Bucks team that their ceiling is still pretty low. Like, you can beat this Bucks team, right? It's not like you start off against the Niners or against the Cowboys team that kicked your butts a couple weeks ago. So you got to find a way to get up for this game. And if now you got your quarterback dealing with a dislocated finger, your star receiver dealing with a bruised and beat up knee, it's ugly for Philly. And I don't know what they need to do. If they lose, and I'll put it this way. If they lose in really bad fashion to the Bucks, there's only one team that's remotely close to them as far as, like, I don't know how to fix them and I don't know what they do, and that's the Jags. Like, you could ask me right now, and we can talk about it here in a second, like, what do you do with the Jags? No idea. Like, I have no idea. I don't know what went wrong. Like, I don't watch every single Jags game closely. We're going to have to get a Jags, beat reporter on the show this offseason. And I'm just going to be the same thing with the Eagles. Like, we need to find, especially if the Eagles get beat and they lose badly to the Bucks and they're out after week 1, those are two teams that, like, we're going to need to do a deep dive on this offseason, because it's like, what the hell happened? And like, I can explain it for my team. You can explain it for your team, teams we watch a little bit more. But the Eagles right now,
from a bird's eye view, it doesn't
make
add
sense.
Up.
It doesn't make sense. The talent, they were there. I mean, they weren't, and it's not like early in the season when they got to their 10 wins, they were like ugly win. They were winning games. They looked good. I mean, they beat, good teams on the road, and it's just completely gone to shit. I mean, it's just gone to shit. And now they're clinging to can we beat the Bucks? That's a tough place to be if you're an Eagles fan.
Disappointing, perplexing, a lot of adjectives to describe this year, really, for many reasons, but for the Eagles and the Jags, as you mentioned as well.
There's one team we haven't talked about yet in the playoffs, and they also are in the state of Pennsylvania.
They are as well, but I want to add this nugget with the Eagles real quick. It's from Adam Schefter. The streak continues with the Cowboys winning the NFC East. It marks the 19th straight year that the division hasn't produced a repeat champion. So for as much as we've thought about the NFC East, I mean, we've known that it's a very talented division, and it's gone from the best division in the league to the worst division of the league many, many times over the last couple decades. But for the last, 19 years, for there never to being a repeat champion, that's pretty interesting, because the Cowboys had a solid run there, and the Giants had their run, and the Eagles did too, but no one ever repeated as a champion.
That is a crazy stat. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe we bring on the Eagles beat reporter and just says that. Like, I don't know.
It couldn't happen.
It's like the Bears can't beat the Packers. It's just a curse. Like, there are things like you just can't. They're out of your control. It's the football gods.
So yes, the Pittsburgh Steelers have found themselves. Obviously, we already talked about the Dolphins and the Rams there at the 6 seeds, and the Steelers are the remaining playoff team that we haven't discussed. So we can, venture into that now. Obviously, the Pittsburgh needed some fortune to come their way, and that was in the way of Derrick Henry and the Tennessee Titans. Henry, who very well played his last game as a Titan, had a really good game. Mike Vrabel had talked about how he wasn't gonna lay down and how motivated they were to get a win, regardless of the fact that it meant nothing for them overall. They wanted to play spoiler. Jacksonville completely falling apart. I feel like we're going to talk about them a lot this offseason. To kind of dissect what went wrong. But the fact that, they were at the highest of highs last year of, like, winning a playoff game and coming back in the fashion they did, and rebounding from an awful Urban Meyer year and just putting that all behind them, to this year falling flat in so many ways, having injuries. It's been brutal. But for Pittsburgh, they're a hard one to kind of figure out, I think, too, for a lot of people, because it's almost like, man, do they truly deserve to be in this position? I mean, they're here, so I guess yes. And they won 3 games in a row, 2 on the road against teams fighting to make the playoffs, and one of them being a division rival, albeit one that sat their starters. So it's like, how do you weigh this? I don't know. But the fact that they're 10-7, the fact that they're here, you got to say kudos in some respect to Mike Tomlin to not letting the doors completely fall off of this thing. But the writing was on the wall for a while. It took him a long time to finally fire Matt Canada. It seemed like it came too late. They seemed to turn things around after that firing happened. But then, made the decision to go with Mitch and, stuck with Mitch an extra game, probably too long, and then went to Mason Rudolph. And so, yeah, you can say, hey, props to Tomlin for at least making the moves and realizing something and not digging in his heels. But then at the same time, you could say you should have done this a long time ago. And maybe you should have gone to Mason and realized that Mason was the better option over Mitch before it even happened.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Those are the things where it's very, very curious. But Pittsburgh's running the football probably better than any team in the league right now.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm like, okay, I don't think they're going to make a run at the Super Bowl. I think that's pretty clear. I hope they do. That'd be awesome. I doubt it. But the type of football that they're playing and the fact that they're not turning the ball over, that gives them an opportunity here to win a playoff game and to maybe beat Buffalo if they can win the time of possession, just run the ball down their throats.
And correct me if I'm wrong. If Pittsburgh beats Buffalo, they automatically go to Baltimore, right? Like the lowest seed, it reseeds, and Baltimore gets the lowest remaining seed, correct?
Correct. So that'd be very interesting. And they've swept Baltimore this year, and they're 7-1 in the last 8 against Baltimore.
They're just like Cleveland. Like, they should feel great about their spot. Like, if you can win one game, you pretty much guarantee yourself a date with a divisional opponent that you feel good against, right? So I will say this, and then I'll let you kind of bounce this kind of idea off you. Personally, if I was a Steelers fan, I would have wanted to play Kansas City number 1. But I would rather have played Buffalo than Houston. And hear me out with this. Houston in the Dome, I don't feel like I match up as well against than I do a Kansas City offense that is all out of whack, outdoors in bad weather, or Buffalo, who's now become let's run the ball outdoors in bad weather. Like, if you're Pittsburgh, you want to be outdoors in bad weather, right? Because your hope to win the game is our defense can somehow ball out. Mike Tomlin puts a game plan together, and we can control the clock, run the heck out of the football, and then hit 1 or 2 big pass plays when we need it, and we skirt out of there with a 20-17 victory, right? And I feel that's more capable of happening versus Buffalo and Kansas City than Houston, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that probably. I mean, I think I would still it's hard to say I want Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen versus, and I mean, we just talked about how well CJ Stroud is playing, and he is. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly a case to be made for that, especially the way that they're turning the ball over. Like, Buffalo is turning the ball over a lot. And I feel like Pittsburgh, when they've won this year, they've ran the ball well and they've won the turnover battle, and they don't turn it over very much. And so that's where I think like Miami not taking advantage of those opportunities, like, absolutely killed them. Pittsburgh's going to have to win a game where they can win with like 24 points. Right. And so, holding Kansas City to less than 24 points, ironically, seems a bit feasible nowadays. Same with Buffalo. I mean, they just got held to 21 against Miami, who was missing all their pass rushers. Problem for Pittsburgh now, which sucks, is they weathered all of this adversity throughout the year and lost so many key defensive players. They finally, scratch and claw their way to the playoffs, and they're going to have to do it without TJ Watt, which blows. So TJ Watt is at least missing 1 game, and he very well might, miss a second if they even get to the second round. So that kind of sucks. But they can still generate a pass rush, and so, that can pressure Josh Allen into making errant throws. And all Pittsburgh needs, they'll get Minka Fitzpatrick back. They'll get some guys back on the back end. So all they need is just a splash play on defense or two to give their offense an opportunity to once regain control of possession. And then, man, just hold the ball for 35, 40 minutes of this game. And, hopefully you'll come away with the win. So the blueprint's there. We'll see if they can do it. They're obviously heavy underdogs. But all you need is a chance, and they got there. And so, for that, I'm certainly happy. And, if they lost, it was going to be a matter of like 2 draft spots. So that at the end of the day, it's like,
Yeah.
I didn't really care at that point. I'd rather, I guess, if they were in that position to get to the postseason, we'll just see if they still feel determined enough in the offseason, depending how far they go, to make the right moves, to get an offensive, play caller in there that's a splash higher and get some stuff done. But yeah, that was fun, man. We got through all 14 teams there for this playoff run. And, obviously for our listeners and viewers, tune in Friday. We'll have a full prediction episode ahead of what the Saturday games, the Sunday games, and Monday as well, right? They're coming. They're doing. Or no, they're not doing any Monday.
No, it
are
is Monday
they?
night. Yeah,
they are. Yeah.
They have the.
Yeah.
That's the
I
Eagles and Bucks.
disagree with that, man. You should not make these guys play on a short week going into the second week. But
ESPN pays a lot of money for
they get it.
I will say, to wrap up, kind of the thoughts on it. One of the big things, I think this offseason is going to be fascinating, right? We already have coaches being fired. We already have storylines really brewing. We'll try to touch on any more of that news that breaks on Friday as well. But I will say again, Jags, we're going to have to do a deep dive in. I mean, what an epic 8-3. Yeah. I don't feel like you move on from Doug Peterson. I don't. But you also need to get answers as to like why Trevor Lawrence didn't take another step forward versus regressing. Like it was a regression. I also get the feeling like it wouldn't shock me. I don't know about you. Like if all of a sudden we get announced like, oh, Trevor Lawrence is going to have like 4 surgeries this offseason.
Right. Yeah.
It just felt like that kind of year for Trevor. And maybe that's, you just chalk it up to like, you need to heavily invest in that offensive line. Yeah. And then find another playmaker or 2 on defense to like that defense. You just leaked points at times this year. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, I've said it for the past, like, it feels like 2 months, but I'll say it again. I know Bears fans, we all want to start talking about the number 1 pick. It is an exciting thing to talk about. Until I know who is coaching this football team going forward, there's no point in talking about the pick and who you want quarterbacking the football team. I'm fervently against keeping a coach and drafting a new quarterback. If you're going to draft a new quarterback, I want a new coach and quarterback. I want them mirrored together. I want them simpatico. I want them on the same trajectory going forward. I'm so sick and tired of a lame duck head coach 1 year gets a new quarterback, and then this cycle continues, and then all of a sudden the young quarterback in year 2, Mitch had a new coach year 2, Justin had a new coach year 2. I can't do Caleb having a new coach year 2. Like if that's what we do, it's the mark of a broken organization. So again, if this is a really telling week for the Chicago Bears, if Eberflus keeps his job, I think that's a really good sign for Justin Fields keeping his job and the Bears going all in on trading tons of assets. If Eberflus and Getsy are gone, then I think Justin Fields is pretty much a goner. You can write that last will and testament for his career as a Chicago Bear as well. I get the feeling right now Eberflus is staying. What that means for Justin Fields, I think it leans 51-49 that he's staying. But I'll tell you what, this organization, after that loss to 0-2 against Green Bay this year, it's just unacceptable. And losing week 1 and week 18, the way they lost, it is I personally hope there's a lot of hard look in the mirror discussions going on at Hallis Hall right now, because that is just the opposite of what you need as a franchise going forward. You cannot be embarrassed twice a year against the team up north. You just can't do it.
Yeah, we need to, rekindle those sayings from Lovie Smith in his introductory press conference about winning. Like we need that fire of only winning.
Ryan Poles said in his press conference, we're going to take back the North. And I think,
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So many people talk about, you have the 4th best quarterback in your division. Like, you hear about, like, you got to get a new quarterback. It's so painfully obvious to me. I don't know if you feel this way too. We have the 4th best head coach in the NFC North. Yeah. Kevin O'Connell, Matt LaFleur, Dan Campbell. Every single Bears fan would take them over
Oh,
Matt
yeah.
Eberflus.
No question.
And I think if you went up to any NFL team, you said you fired your head coach, you have 4 choices. Rank these 1 through 4. Who would you want? Eberflus, Campbell, O'Connell, and LaFleur. I think 90% of the time, Eberflus would be 4th place on that.
Probably
list.
100. Yeah.
So that to me is just a telling stat. I know you get frustrated with Mike Tomlin. I know you do. But you've had, 18, 17 years now of you haven't had a losing record.
Yeah.
I can't get back-to-back winning seasons to save my life. You know what I mean? Like it is
right.
I can't even beat the Packers. I haven't beat the Packers in Green Bay since like 2010 or like 2015. I mean, it is bad. It's just bad. So when it to me, as much as I want to keep Justin, at this point in time, I'm more done with Eberflus and the coaching staff. Dan, the stat was, and I'll read this to conclude. The quarterbacks the Bears beat this year under the great Matt Eberflus defensive head coach and coordinator, Kyler Murray, Brian Hoyer, Taylor Heineke, Sam Howell, Bryce Young, Josh Dobbs, and Jared Goff on the road in the cold. 1 in 7 against teams 500 or better. Why are we talking about returning the head coach?
Right. Yep. They're gonna look at the turnaround and the finish of the season.
Bear down.
But there's a lot more to look at for sure. I agree with you there, and there needs to be accountability in Hallis Hall and right that ship sooner rather than later.
And I do understand what they're saying about continuity, right? Like I get it.
Yeah, that is important.
It
but
sucks.
You can't have continuity at the expense of growth for your players.
But if I'm keeping continuity, then I need Getsy gone at least. Like you cannot bring Getsy back again. Like the offense was not consistently good enough.
No, just didn't take enough strides.
You can't bring him back. Well, you got to go get a new offensive coordinator. And then go get Marvin Harrison Jr. so he doesn't have to block screen passes on 3rd and 22.
And find a running back that you're willing to commit to as well.
Dude,
that would be helpful.
This team needs an RB1 so bad, like a true RB1. Like I don't know, a guy like David Montgomery would fit great with this offense.
Yeah. Oh, no kidding. All right, that'll do it for our look at the playoff slate that is set and ready to go for this weekend. Again, we'll be back here Friday with our full predictions of the games, but that'll do it for now. We'll see you then. Appreciate all the support. As always, like, subscribe at FB Lounge Pod, and we'll see you back here before you know it.